War, something that has been around since the dawn of time, from fighting over colonies, settlements, and territories, to taking over vast amounts of land, countries, and even continents. And with the change of goals and time, the change of tactics and weapons have evolved also, from guerrilla warfare to blitzkrieging to bombs that can now devastate complete cities. But what is war? War is a state of armed conflict between different nations or groups within another nation or state. Now it is this idea of an armed conflict that makes many people opposed to war and fighting and possibly taking lives of other fellow human beings. The way we fight wars today was a theory dating back 800 years ago made by a man named Thomas Aquinas, but the idea can date even farther back at around 1700 years ago. This is called the just war theory and comprises of two different parts, when and how. Now let's go over what this theory actually entails. There are two parts: when it's justified to go to war, and when and how to fight the war in a moral way. For the first part, there are 4 criteria you must meet. 1. Just authority. It must be started by someone with political authority in a system that in itself the distinction of justice, so no dictatorships and no regimes, and it would be accepted in places with democracy and constitutional monarchies, among others. And then number 2, there must be a just cause, clearly seen by outside countries as well, such as an invasion that was unprovoked or helping an ally. Be able to prove also that has been committed against your state or country. Number 3, just intention. There has to be clear and right intention behind going to war. There is a limit of how much you can fight, and once that goal is reached, there is no need to fight any longer, so you're inclined to not fight. And then number 4, last resort. This one's pretty self-explanatory. There has to be no way within reason to solve the problem peacefully. All other measures have been tried. So if you have all 4 of these reasons, then war can be seen as a more moral act and can be accepted by society. For the second part, there are 3 main criteria for actions in war, and the first one being proportionality. The amount of force you use should only be enough to achieve the just cause previously gone over. No overabundant force is necessary to win should have to be used in the war. Number 2, the innocent people must not be targeted in attacks by the aggressor, meaning that the cities where civilians live within a nation and that have no involvement in the war whatsoever cannot be attacked by another country or state. The third being responsibility, or the country is not responsible for the unforeseen effects of war as long as A, there was good intentions behind the act, B, the effects were unknown and non-intended at the time, and C, the overall good of the war outweighs the negative done by the act committed at the time of war. When all of these things have been met, going to war can be seen as more moral, and taking others' lives won't be as morally wrong, and even seen as unpatriotic if one does not fight. Now, people who would still see this as immoral would be those with more pacifistic viewpoints, but for the overwhelming majority, if these conditions are met, then it would be seen as okay, and even warranted sometimes, to go to war. Now, some of you may be asking the question, why? Why did I just sit through all that information? Well, it was to inform you. When it comes to taking lives and potentially shaping civilizations and countries, it is reassuring to know that sometimes it doesn't have to be an all-negative, no-win situation, that there are times that can legitimately require acts of war. Now, with war being one of the things that can have a big impact internationally in a relatively small amount of time, it is good to know when it would be deemed morally acceptable to go to war. Another reason that this way of fighting is important is it helps shape the way we can fight an aggressor who doesn't necessarily take the form of a state or country. Now, with the concept of terrorism now a prominent thing in society, the game changes a little more and becomes more complicated. Now, with facing terrorism, we can still have all the criteria for the first part met, but it is the second part that becomes a little blurred. We can use our military proportionately, but the biggest issue and obstacle with fighting terrorists is that they blend in with the civilians around them, making it harder to objectively bomb the ISIS headquarters or to do raids on Al-Qaeda's bomb-making factories. So with the idea of not harming civilians, it makes us have to work even harder to fight this evil. So the questions in the air here is it morally okay to harm civilians if it also kills and severely damages the operations of a militant group? And to this, according to the rule of greater good in part 2 of the just war theory, it would be not against the law, but then it would be up to you if that law is moral. So in this case, it is whatever you would decide is better. Does the end justify the means, or does the means justify the end? When does too many civilian casualties become too many to figure out a better way? It is hard to fight an enemy that doesn't use the same rulebook as you. So perhaps the one part of the just war theory that isn't very clear with this scenario is one of the hardest parts to figure out.